Hey everyone, Jetpack Penguin here. So today I'm making a guide on the character called Gilgamesh. This will be a very quick guide explaining his kit alone, since I don't really expect everyone wanting to read it fully. I hope you enjoy this video. Alright, so let's get started. First, let's talk about the technique. This technique is known as King's Permission. Basically, here he uses these chains, which are called chains of the heaven, and he uses these chains to immobilize the enemy. Now, what more does this technique do? So, when the combat starts, the affected enemies don't immediately take action. This will give your team the initiative. Second, Gilgamesh also gains 3 interest when the combat starts. So the enemy in that state, which means they were immobilized, will take lightning damage depending on your Gilgamesh's attack stat. Alright, so let's get started. First, we should talk about the talent Amuse Me to the fullest. If we talk about this now, we'll be able to understand the other parts much easier. So to all those who have watched Fate and played games like Grand Order, you should know about Gil's character. His entire kit in Star Whale revolves around interest, which is super cool by the way. I hope more characters arrive where their personality is in the kit. Okay, so moving on. He has 3 things in his talent: King's Burden, Interest, and finally King's Acknowledgement. How do these things work? Allow me to explain. So at the start of the fight, he is bored. He has no interest in this fight. And each time an ally takes an action, like attacking, he gains 1 interest. What's nice about this interest is that he gains more speed based on how much interest he has. When he finally reaches 10 interest, he enters interest peak state. In this state, he stops holding back and auto-attacking, and finally uses his noble phantasm, Gates of Babylon. And every time he uses this attack, he gains King's Acknowledgement. This allows him to ignore 30% defense of the enemies. And this is very good by the way. You can just flat out ignore 30% of their defense. Alright, let's move to the final thing, King's Burden. So, when an ally, for example let's take Artoria Saber, she uses her ult, Gilgamesh also gets his damage increased for 3 turns. Meaning, after they use an ult, you can immediately use your own ult with Gilgamesh and do more damage. Alright, so let's move on to the basic attack. This is, the typical basic attack you'd expect from most characters. But what's interesting about the basic attack is, he does it on his own when he's still bored and doesn't have 10 interest points. And this is essentially himself nerfing himself like how he does in the Fate series and the games as well. So what happens? Nothing happens. There's not much to talk about. All he does is just a basic attack and that's about it. Alright, so let's move on to the skill. This skill is initially locked and you cannot use it because at this moment Gilgamesh is still not interested enough yet. And he obviously auto-attacks with basic attack. But when he finally gets 10 interest points and his interest is peak, he decides to use his noble phantasm, Gates of Babylon. Here, he deals the highest damage to the selected enemy alone, while the surrounding enemies take a somewhat lower damage but still they take damage. This is an AoE attack. This also has additional effects. He gains this stat called King's Acknowledgement. This allows him to ignore 30% of the enemy's defense, which is really good by the way. Alright, let's move on to the most exciting part, his ultimate. As discussed before, we know that every time an ally uses an ultimate, he gains this additional stat called King's Burden. This allows him to do more ultimate damage. But let's discuss more about the ultimate specifically. Here he uses his most treasured weapon, Air, which, if you know the Fate series and the games etc. you'll know. This ultimate costs 360 energy and it deals heavy AoE lightning damage to all the enemies on the field. There's also more actually. He does additional 10 hits during this ultimate and each strike attacks a random enemy in the field. Of course, if you have only one enemy like a boss, for example the Flame Weaver, this additional hits will simply hit that one target alone 10 times. It is pretty neat.
これが天の鎖よ。指示待ったえ。よくも。
Okay, I have a confession to make. I know I said the ultimate is the most exciting part, but I lied. I'm sorry, guys. And girls too. So, this is the most exciting part, I promise. He has an additional talent. This is called I grant you permission to strike. If you have a Toya, that is Saber, will allow Gilgamesh and Saber to do joint follow-up attack. The really cool way. So, what is this joint follow-up attack, you might ask? This just Gilgamesh rage baiting Altoya to do more damage. So how does this work? They do both wind damage and lightning damage, wind from Saber and lightning from Gilgamesh. And this is all AoE by the way, so this hits everyone on the field. What happens more? Are there additional effects? Of course there are. So when Gilgamesh does this, he gains 3 total interest points. And Saber also gets a lot of energy compared to, her normal attacks. And her next ultimate, Excalibur, it does way more damage. Which is an indirect buff to Saber, which I'm so happy about by the way.